Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor and subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. And you can catch us on YouTube as part of the Empire Media Network, AMPIRE. If you're watching us right now, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Going to keep doing this all year, folks. Today, I'm joined by my pal, Bram Weinstein, the voice of the Washington Commanders, as we wrap up the first week of practice. The Commanders are off on Sunday, so there's not going to be any practice. So I wanted to do a longer podcast so you could get a feel for more so for what happened from the week from someone else's perspective other than mine. But well, before I get to that, one reminder, you can follow Bram on Twitter at RealBramW. You can read my work on ESPN.com. Of course, there have been a bunch of news stories throughout this week. Have a story up now on Ryan Kerrigan announcing his retirement. And we also have for ESPN.com, we have daily nuggets from every NFL training camp, so you can find it there. Pay attention to not only what's going on here, but also around the NFL. And before I get to my conversation with Bram, I did want to give one or two little nuggets from Saturday just to kind of keep that little momentum going about practice, et cetera. But the one guy, or I want to talk about one position, that's tight end. And Bram and I get into some of this with the tight end group in general. But there were two plays today to rookie Cole Turner that I think really kind of highlight what he can add to this offense. And if he's going to be a contributor in this offense, it'll be because of these reasons. And there was one play in the red. They did a lot of red zone work on Saturday. So there was one play in the red zone where Wentz basically hits him in the back of the end zone and throws it up high. Bobby McCain in front of him. McCain is not a tall guy, but it takes a really good throw there. But you're throwing it up because you're throwing it to Cole Turner, who is a tall guy, 6'5", whatever he is, 6'6". But he plays big. And so Wentz puts it up high. So you have a tall quarterback throwing to a tall tight end, gets it up high. Nobody's got a shot at the ball except for Cole Turner, and he comes down with it. A couple plays later, I think the other thing that he showed is not just the height, the way he's big, but the extension that he can play with. So there was a zone. He finds a soft spot in the zone, and there was a defensive back right to the right of him, but nobody had a chance to really close on the play because of the way that Turner extended for the ball. And just a good catch, but it's because of that extension. He's big, and he plays bigger because of that. It makes him tough to guard in those situations. I like the way he got to that spot and immediately sat down. He turns and the ball's there, and just a really nice job by him. But it shows a way that he can contribute right away, potentially. Then I also saw some of that same size, Curtis Hodges, the big tight end as well, and Taylor Heineke, similar to what I just described with Wentz and Turner in the back of the end zone. You saw that with Heineke and Curtis Hodges. Throws it up high, throw it to where your guy is the only one who's going to get it. But he did. He came down with it right in the back of the end zone. Just a nice throw because it was the right throw, and it was a really good catch to come down. Now, there was some dispute about whether he got his feet in bounds. The defense, of course, said no. It looked like he got it in bounds. There's no replay, so we're going to go with that instinct. But a nice job. But again, it shows what they can do. Hodges has more work to do than Turner, of course. But I think that's where Turner's going to help you, is he can do some things right now that I think can help this team this season. So there you go. I just wanted to pass along some of those nuggets. And Bram and I, again, get into some of what happened, a little bit of what happened today, but really what's been happening throughout the course of the week. So no more wasted time. Let's get to my conversation with the voice of the Washington Commanders, Bram Weinstein. Bram, one of the perks, I think, of this job sometimes is being able to bring your son to a practice where maybe it's kind of a cool thing for them, where they actually say, hey, my dad's is not such a bad guy. Your son was out here today. Seemed like a pretty cool kid. Did he have fun?
He had a blast. He's fan for life now, because I'm just going to say this, and no one's going to believe me, but I'm going to tell you, it was completely, literally unsolicited. He has a Terry McLaurin jersey, and he wore it to camp today. And I guess McLaurin saw him, because he wasn't standing out where we stand. He was behind the ropes with the rest of the fans. He saw him. And as we were walking away from the practice area where McLaurin was catching passes, somebody from the staff ran over to him and said, Terry wants me to give you this, and gave him a game ball. So, I mean, I can't even begin to describe to you, how I felt about seeing that. I didn't ask for that, and it was pretty unbelievable. Like after the practice, Sam Cosmi came over and talked to him. He met Ron Rivera. He got autographs from Jahan Dotson, McLaurin, a bunch of other players, Jamin Davis. I mean, he's over the moon. And you know what? Like, it's funny. I remember going to Carlisle with my parents doing a pilgrimage, and there's pictures of me like shaking hands with Joe Gibbs and getting Joe Jacoby's autograph. And it stuck with me. And so I believe football's kind of family to me. We've laughed about it here. Like, you're kind of married to it, and it's really not a joke. You are. It was a special day for me and him, really.
Yeah, and that's all cool stuff. Like, I remember when my kids were younger, you'd have a chance if there was a day in Richmond or something like that where you could bring them out there, and they would get an opportunity to at least see players up close or maybe meet them. And, my son still talks about a time where he met Chris Cooley and some other guys like that, because it's just a cool thing to do for them. So I'm glad he was able to be out here. Glad I could meet him. Like I said, shout out to he seems like a pretty fun kid. So anyway, but today was a lot. There were a couple things. I want to wrap up this first week in a minute, because it was 4 practices that we saw, and you start to get a feel for some things. But today also was about Ryan Kerrigan. And he had his retirement press conference Saturday morning. What are your thoughts about him? And clearly, I mean, his last year was playing under the Washington football team, but he was a Redskin. And so what are your thoughts on him and his retirement and what he meant here?
Yeah, for Archer getting to see the cool part of Dad's job, him watching me interview him for for my show was, cool. And I think it dawns on them at some point too, because I try not to make a big deal of what I do with my kids, but it is a very special job. And when you're just walking around and Ryan Kerrigan knows who you are and is like high-fiving you and then does an interview with you, it's cool, for my kid to see that. I thought Ryan is one of the, singularly 3 or 4 best players that's come through here over the last decade, maybe the best. He belongs in the Ring of Honor, in my opinion. He owns the sack record for the team. I think he had an extremely steady career. I wouldn't call it spectacular, but certainly for this team, it was really, really good and reliable. He was a great ambassador for this team. He never seemed to get frustrated with all the ups and downs, and there were a lot of them here. I think he's one of those guys, like, when you make a first round pick, this is what you can hope you get out of it. They got a decade out of a guy who had almost 100 sacks, barely missed any games, and always said the right thing and was always a good teammate. And today, when I had a chance to talk to him, I did talk about the future, and I asked him about Chase Young and Montez Sweat. And I'll let you, tune into my show. You'll get to hear what he said about those 2 players and, where he kind of feels about, where things are going with those 2 specific people. So really, I think he's just had a wonderful career, and I'm glad that he chose to do this today, and I'm glad the team had him back.
Yeah, and to me, he was everything about him was consistent. Approach, productivity, professionalism, dealing with him in the locker room. He was always the same guy. There aren't a lot of guys who I think are always like that. I mean, Santana Moss was a guy like that too, which is why he's always been one of my favorites to have dealt with. And I think I think certain other guys, John Allen is consistent. I think Kerrigan is it was like that, right? And he was always approachable, it gave you time, etc. So I always appreciate that about him. So it was nice to see him have that day. But you see the numbers that he put up, just very consistent throughout. And it's no surprise, because I did a story a couple of years ago, Bram, where I kind of went over, like, how do you get to be this NFL Iron Man? And part of what it was is like the daily regimen. And he even said today that when he wake up and eat breakfast, even in the offseason, you're thinking about how does this affect football? But he would do things like he was drinking 300 ounces of water during the season just to stay hydrated and just to make sure you help his body recover.
I think I'm drinking 300 ounces of water the last few days. It's been a burner. I mean, I know we've had morning practices, but it's been a burner out there. But Kerrigan was I just think he was a great role model, for the franchise. I'm glad he's back. I'm glad he's making his home here. Hopefully he's done a lot of work in the community. He had a golf tournament that raised a lot of money for leukemia research for a long time that I think got stunted because of COVID. Everything shut down, and hopefully he'll get back to that type of work as well. And he also told me he wants to get into coaching. So, we'll see what happens, whether that's locally or within the professional collegiate ranks.
Do you think they missed a guy like him in that room last year? Maybe whether it's him, because I know they obviously made the decision not to resign him, but a guy with that kind of veteran knowledge, and he even talked about it too, about guys coming up to him and asking him, he kind of likes that role, which is why the coaching appeals. Do you think they missed a guy like that in the locker room with that defensive line, especially the pass rushers?
I think last year, in hindsight now, after the way that the season started and what was being said about that group specifically, that it might have been helpful to have a veteran voice in the room that the younger guys like Sweat and Young really leaned on early in their careers, and he was willing to give him time and give him his knowledge and his wisdom of his time here and what he's learned. And like every team does this, and this team did it. Like I think John Bostic was on this team last year partially because they wanted him to be a mentor, not
Right.
necessarily to be a player, but to be a mentor. They brought Thomas Davis in, first year, an longtime Carolina guy. There wasn't a lot left in the tank, but we know why. He was here to kind of set a tone, for everybody about this is how things are done under Ron Rivera and try to get everybody, not in line, but like help that process along from inside the locker room. And so I don't know that it was a mistake because, like, look, like you do have to have players that you think are going to be effective on the field on your
Right.
roster. You only have 53, and Philadelphia did not have a good pass rush, and he barely played. So that ought to tell you, where he was in his career at that point. That said, I do think just based on how the season started, where we're talking about maturity and guys aren't doing things exactly the way the coaches want them to do, and the line's not working in coordination with one another, it might have been helpful to just have him in the room. And maybe some of that stuff would have kind of flipped the switch maybe a little sooner in the season.
And I also wonder too, you can serve as a bridge between the players and the coach if you have that sort of guy who has a relationship with the coach like that, who can talk to the coach and say, this technique isn't working because, or what you're asking to do here is tough because, or you can tell the player may ask you, Ryan, what do you think about what he's saying? Well, just work within this way or something like that. So there's a lot of wisdom there to be gained without a doubt. So, but it was good to see him. He looks healthy. He looks happy. His 3 daughters were here with him. Fun to see him in that role. So I hope he stays in the game because I think he does have a lot of knowledge to give. But let's get to what's going on right now. And what are some of your bigger takeaways throughout this first week?
Defense is ahead of the offense, or offense isn't functioning the way I think they would hope. But I don't want to like make too much of it or throw red flags up or all that stuff. I think partially because I think we need to be careful with Wentz, frankly. Like I think it's one thing to any quarterback, because this happened last year too, where the reason why Taylor Heinicke had a small chance at winning the job going into the summer was things were not functioning that well actually in the spring with
Right.
Ryan Fitzpatrick, which led to Ron Rivera saying Heinicke has a shot at the job. That's not what happened this spring. Actually, everything looked pretty good during OTAs. But, if you just want a first impression of the first few days and it's still July, there was a tremendous amount of inaccuracy. The defensive line is blowing up the offensive line over and over. If you want to feel good about the back seven, go watch the last few days of practice. You will feel really good about the back seven. And that said, like the offense certainly doesn't look like that it's, got itself together at this point. And some of that is Wentz and obvious inaccuracy that you'd have to be blind not to see it, during practice. That said, I will hear out Ron Rivera the other day where he's like, hey, look, like we're not game planning for anything. The defense is kind of doing their thing and we're doing our thing. And it's different when we kind of get, to try to game plan against one another. And give it time. Like, let's be fair about this. Let's give it time. They don't have all their pieces out there. They are shuffling around a lot of offensive linemen right now. I think they're shuffling around a lot of package groups because I don't think they know exactly what they want to run out there because they have a lot of options right now. So I don't want to get too, wigged out about the whole thing. But if you have these concerns, and I do, about Wentz and accuracy and Wentz and decision making, you're not going to like what you saw the first couple of days. Frankly, you aren't.
And there is a flip side, and part of that, because you and I have talked about this on the sidelines a few times. And when I'm watching him, sometimes I'm like, well, this is the guy that we've seen on film. He was inconsistent in Indianapolis. Some of that was on him and his throws. Some of that was on what I feel was not a great receiving group. Some of that was on the offensive line, but certainly there are times he just misses throws, or he throws even on air. You'll see him throw high, too high, maybe miss a guy because of that. That's where, you see some of those inconsistencies as well. And then you see some throws where it's like, wow, some of those deep balls off his back foot, throwing 40 yards down the sideline.
Yes.
To Jahan Dotson. And then today, Saturday, there was a throw that he made to the back of the end zone to Jahan Dotson. And I was standing back there with a couple of the reporters, like, why are you throwing it back there to him? Because, he's 5'10" or whatever. Okay. And he wasn't really open. It was just a bullet. It was too high. It was incomplete. Come back the next play. And I'm like, well, he made the same catch in that same spot against Indiana. Go watch the film. Next play, Dotson with the little skinny post in that right down in the inside on the right side, and a bullet by Wentz for a touchdown. And like, you see that too. So, so where is it, like, what's what should be the takeaway with that? Because you see those throws and you see the other stuff. Is it more encouraging here, pessimistic here, or is it, I guess maybe it's just all of it.
So, what you get to see and what you're describing in real time is the reason why he's here. And the way I would put it, taking a chance on him, right? A big chance on him.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
He can do things that Heinicke cannot do, or actually most people can't do. And so that's on display. The one that made the rounds the other day, the catch by Dotson down the sideline the other day, it was great pass, great catch, all that stuff. Like, that was off his back foot, throwing a lob past 40 yards like it was nothing, and that's the type of stuff they haven't had here in a while, really. Dwayne Haskins had the type of arm strength, but he clearly, had not caught up to what they were hoping for with an understanding of the offense. Every other quarterback they've had over the last, few years, at least, they couldn't do these things. Right. So that's on display here, and that's the positive, and that's why he's here. Now, you and I both know this, like, in this league, the margin for error for success and non-success is very small, like really, 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 really small. And so many of his throws, and this is why I want to be careful, because this is really the first week he's had everybody. It's the first week they're really practicing. It is still all new to him. That's why I really want to be fair to him, because, you do see a lot of what you saw last year, which worries me. But I don't want to, like, what's he supposed to walk in here and everything's supposed to be clicking? Like, that's not fair to him, but that said, a lot of these throws are off, and they're off in a way that you just know it when you see it, that if that stuff does not move a foot to the left or a foot to the right or a foot lower than it is, you're going to have receivers not catching it in stride, or you're going to have batted balls, or you're going to have incompletions, and it's going to have a devastating effect on the game where mistakes are going to happen. So, I want to be fair to him, but I'm seeing that. You're seeing it too. Everybody is seeing it, right? So hopefully he'll have a better week next week. Like, nothing's changing here. Nobody's like calling for a job change or anything like that. But like, some of the stuff that we saw, which is, you hope for a different level of preciseness, especially on intermediate routes. It is not there yet, not in practice.
No. And again, I think this is what we saw. And I think what I'm curious to see as we get deeper in the preseason and start in the games is how the speed manifests itself for him. And while, we all think that he's got more receiving talent here, does it play out that way? Right. And how does that help him? And so I think that's something to watch too. And do they give him more open targets? But that's still, even with open targets, you still see the inaccuracy. Sometimes it's not just the wrong shoulder. It's just like it's an airmail. And, there
are a couple of things too here, like, that I saw that I really like about him that has carried over here. Like, his ball fakes are excellent. The pre-snap, 3-step, just he knows where he's going with the ball pre-snap. Excellent. Like, he's world-class excellent at this stuff. And you see that. And I heard Ron Rivera in an interview recently where he said something, we're emphasizing him to take more layups. I think it's that's where I landed on him, as I've talked to you for the last few months, that's where I've landed on him. I think they need to figure out a way to get the ball out of his hands quickly, hopefully have some success with some of these skill position players that can make some yards with their legs. We have dynamic skill position players, so hopefully he can break a few plays, and maybe that gives him the confidence, and then things kind of build from there. I know you're on the other side of this, that that a defense is going to adjust very quickly if they do that. But I don't know. I don't want to say baby step this a little bit, but I'm more feel like his confidence needs to be built back up just a little by little by little. And the small wins are going to really, really, really matter for him, in my opinion, early.
I think they will. And I think when you and I have talked, like, I think they're going to take several shots a game. I don't think you go bombs away the whole game. That would be a massive mistake. That would be, Bruce Arians, the Jameis Winston type of mistake. But I do think you're going to see some of that, because to get some of the underneath stuff, you're going to want to threaten deep. And but I don't think we're too far off in what we're saying here, because I just think you're going to see some of that vertical game, because I know that they want to attack down the field. But the quick game, and you see it sometimes here too, and what I like about it with him is size to see over the line and make a quick decision and a good, accurate, quick throw underneath. And you've seen that more there. I've seen it a couple times with McLaurin. I saw it again today. I think it was McKissick on a slant for running back, and he puts it down nice and low inside and allows him to run after the catch. But it's a quick decision under duress. But that size, I think, helps him in that area too.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we'll never get like the full answer out of him. But what's so odd is that, like, he used to be an extremely accurate passer when he was in Philadelphia. We saw this, we saw it. And, I don't know what it is the last couple of years, but this is where I feel like this is not an athleticism thing. This is a psychological confidence thing. And that's why I think it is so important. They've been messaging from the get-go, you're wanted here, you're wanted here, you're wanted here. Like, don't feel like you have to prove, like, we want you here. We'll deal with it after this year if it's bad, but like, you're wanted here, over and over and over. And I think in camp, even if he struggles, you will not hear a whiff of it's not your job, because they need to keep his confidence up. And then from there, I do like the idea of, can we get a small win here? Make him feel good here, make him feel good there. And if all of a sudden, he starts to trust himself again, then I think, they potentially will have revamped his career and solved a problem that they've had for years, because he's got the ability to do these things, all of them. It's just the question, I think, of building his confidence up to be that guy again.
And also living within the mistakes, because I don't think you're going to necessarily correct his accuracy. And by accuracy, it's not so much completion percentage, it's where are you putting the ball and those kind of things. But you're going to live with that. But that's why I think it's good that they have guys who can extend beyond, make themselves play bigger. I'm trying to avoid saying wide catch radius, but make themselves bigger, which gives him a better target. How much does that help? So I think that's how you mitigate some of those issues for him, is by getting the Cole Turner types who could be a threat in the red zone, et cetera. Who are some other guys? I mean, you've been out here all week. What else has jumped out to you?
On offense or just the team in general?
On anything. If we can stay with offense if you want.
Obviously their tight end room is fascinating right now, with Logan Thomas not necessarily coming back anytime soon. And I know what they're saying about Cole Turner. I mean, I think they've got a hit out of him. And he is, he's big target for sure. There were a couple of moments though, like he does look like a rookie. Like he doesn't get his head around sometimes on things, and they're working with him on stuff like that. Everyone tells me he's not Bates as a blocker. So when he's out there, he ain't blocking anybody. Like they're bringing him out there as a target. So there's work to do. And I think everybody needs to slow their roll on what kind of role he may have. But if Logan Thomas isn't going to be ready for week 1, he's going to be out in the slot a lot, so, we'll see how that goes. Dotson looks as good now as he did in the spring. He's just really, really smooth. He makes one catch a day that you're like, oh man, they got 2 number 1 receivers here, so you feel good about that. The other thing that concerns me about the offense is is a concern I've had all along, which is the offensive line.
Yeah.
They're already shuffling players in there. I'm glad to see that Roulier's back. He's not really practicing yet, but he is back off of the list. They've already had guys shuffle around. They're moving a lot of pieces around in there. Like if you're really paying attention, you'll see a lot of different offensive line combinations, like a lot more than I expected. And granted, I know it's early and they're probably testing a lot of guys out and they need to have contingency plans. And it's a very competitive spot because while I don't know that they have the frontline strength that they had the last couple of years, they certainly do have the depth and it's competitive again. So, but if you watch what's happening, there's a lot of moving parts going on right now. And the defensive line is feasting on them, especially in 9-on-9 and 11-on-11 moments. They are destroying them. So that's a concern for me on that side of the ball for sure.
The 9-on-9 stuff too, and you're right. The defense looks pretty good there. They also know it's a passing drill, so you don't have the threat of the run to stop anybody. But one of the things I like that they do with their offensive line is they do rotate guys. So Chase Rouillet was talking about that today. Is I've played with multiple guards next to me, but that gets you ready. That first of all, it gets you to know that guy a little bit better on the field. So that way, if you're forced to play with them in a game, you already have an idea of what this guy can do. So that's, I guess, the positive spin about them. The other side, though, is you're still searching for some guys because you want that consistency. That's the other side of it. Defensively, what's jumped out to you?
They've stolen the show here first couple of days for sure. Montez Sweat has looked amazing. Deron Payne
looks really good.
Deron Payne is locked in.
Yeah,
I think I said this to you the other day. There was one play where I saw him where he crossed over Sam Cosmi to the point where he fell to his knees. It was like an Allen Iverson move. He is really, really locked in. And on him, it's funny, like, this whole week, I've gotten a few people in my ear saying, they do want to retain him. It's just a cap situation and they're trying to figure it out. And, things changed after Wentz and McLaurin's number ended up going up, but they really, it's not that they don't want him. They want to retain him. They're trying to figure out a way to do it. So we'll see what happens with him. He's looked locked in here. Obviously, like the linebackers are going to be of interest. We'll see. I don't know if they're going to bring someone else in. So, that'll be of interest. And then the safeties, they're rotating a bunch of people around, like where does Cam Curl end up on the field? Probably depends on what package they're in. Is Derek Forrest going to be someone who's playing a lot? Looks like it right now. Is Percy Butler going to have flash in the pan moments, or is he going to be someone they're going to rely on because of his speed? I don't know. So those two spots, and I think we knew that going in. We're watching this, in real time now. But the back seven has looked fantastic. And the other one who's really stood out is Kendall Fuller has had an amazing first week. He seems to be in on literally every play. Everyone saw that crazy play that De'Ami Brown made. That should have been a pick. He could have had 5 picks so far in the first week of camp. Like he's been all over it. And I do think William Jackson III is a little more comfortable. So that's a really good sign. I think that's an underrated, important part of this. He needs to be a number 1 corner for them. He was not a year ago. He is far more comfortable now. And so, that's a good sign. So defensively, while there's big questions here, I feel pretty good, through the first week about what I've seen, even without Chase Young out there.
To me, Bram, they look like they're playing fast. Now, when you're playing fast, it's because you're comfortable in a defense. And I also think, and I've talked about this in the podcast, so people don't need to hear me rehash it, but they have done a better job communicating. You hear Chris Harris all the time harping on that, the defensive backs coach who's always 30 yards behind the ball, but harping on that with them. And you see them being ready with that. And I think William Jackson talked about it today about feeling more comfortable in zone coverage. And it's not as simple as, oh, well, you're playing off, you're doing this. It's about retraining your eyes instead of locking on a guy and knowing that I'm going wherever this guy goes. Now you have to be aware of route concepts. In this formation, this is typically what they do, and you've got this responsibility. Guy leaves your ear, you got to know another guy's coming in. All those things you got to get used to. And I think he says he's starting to get used to. So we'll see, because it's always, listen, when you get used to playing against an offense, which they have, both sides of the ball get used to each other here. It's really the key is, okay, now how do you respond when you see something that you haven't seen yet? And then how do you respond? That's when you know you're playing fast, but good start as far as their play speed goes. But I agree with you on Payne. Payne's looked really good. And you're right. They do want to retain him. I think if he wants John Allen type money, that's going to be difficult for him. But if he goes out and puts up some numbers this year, then he may get that, because John Allen got it a year ago, and that the cap goes up and then the money goes up, but he's looked really good. So
look, they can tag him. I don't think they will, but they can. So, and I just, this week it was interesting because, the everyone just believes like, well, they can't pay everybody. And that is true. They can't, but this idea that he's going to be the odd man out, we always thought he might be. And right now it looks like he still may be, but it was an emphasis to me. Like they want to retain him. They're hoping to figure out a way. They don't know if it's going to happen, but they do.
Yeah. And they know that Fedarian Mathis is not necessarily a replacement, but they know if they can't keep him, they do have his replacement. So, there is that. Have you been able to focus much on Jamin Davis?
Not a lot. I watched him on a few plays, and it's hard for me to kind of render a judgment of where that is. For me, this is the wheels in motion part of it. If Cole Holcomb fits where they want him to fit as the middle linebacker, Jamin Davis is going to play a lot. If Cole Holcomb does not fit the way they want him to fit at middle linebacker, they're going to get another one,
Correct.
put him out there, and Cole Holcomb is probably going to be on the field more often than Davis will. And then when is he playing? And I don't think that's a good outcome. I mean, I think Davis is, in my opinion, behind Chase Young, probably the second best athlete on the defensive side of the ball, which means he needs to be on the field. And they need to find a way to put him on the field. So all goes well to their plan. He'll be playing a lot, and hopefully, he'll have an impact. If the plan doesn't go well at middle linebacker, I don't know how much he's going to play. And that, to me, is going to be one of the indictments of the coaches if they can't figure out a way to get that guy on the field.
I think the coaches and the scouting as well, because it's a combo package. But yeah, he does have the talent to do it. And I've watched him a few times, and I see some reactions people where that looks pretty good, but you really can't say. I think it's really hard to gauge a linebacker also because I don't know if he's hitting his right gap when you're watching it live. I don't have the practice tape to go back and watch, and you're not really getting into that as much. So any rookies besides Dotson, what rookies have just jumped out to you?
Okay. So who's the 7th round pick corner? Holmes.
Christian Holmes, like him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think he's stood out a couple of times. I mean, the back 7 just in general has stood out. There's another guy. I'm not sure if he's a rookie or not. It was the last name of Stribling, who has also, again, back 7 stuff. And I'm kind of paying attention to this because there's depth problems back there, which means there are some young guys that probably are going to make the team. Danny Johnson, he's not a rookie, has had a very good, I think, start to this camp as well. The whole back 7s look good. I think obviously that's going to flip a little bit, but yeah.
Do you know who looks good, Bram? Is Corn Elder.
Corn Elder has had moments. Yeah.
He's had moments.
Corn Elder's had moments. Danny Johnson's had moments. And then these 2 younger guys, specifically Holmes, have really stood out. That's a good sign because that's a big question mark to me is what is the depth of that position there? And we'll have to kind of see, if those guys actually pan out. But I think you're going to see a couple of young names obviously make the team this year. And that's where some of the competition is going to be. I haven't seen much from Mathis, to be honest with you. So I can't really say much about him. And Brian Robinson stands out probably more in an interesting way. Like, I don't know. I had this picture of this kind of big, almost Derrick Henry-ish build. And that is not what he is. He is much kind of longer and leaner than, I kind of expected and heard. And he's still a big guy. He's got very good hands out of the backfield, but I'm looking for a banger up the middle. And I'm hoping that, looks are deceiving, that he is that for them, because I do think that they need that in situational football for sure.
And he runs lower than his size, so he's able to get his pads down, but more so than what Gibson is. And I think that's compared to Gibson, he's going to be more of a between the tackles runner. I like how he sets up his blocks as well. And I really like Holmes. I mean, I think he's been consistent. I watched your guy Stribling yesterday. There were a couple of times where I thought over the middle, he didn't have the ability to stay with the receiver. But I only watched him probably about 4 or 5 plays.
Yep.
So, but it's certainly a guy to watch. And you know what, Bram, all this is for people listening too, this is a step. This is not like, this guy's going to do this during the season. We don't know. It's just like guy to watch, get to the preseason. How did you do in the preseason games? Then you go from there. But, so.
Yeah. And that point, we're talking about roster spots 50 to 53. And guys that are probably inactive, mainly on game days. So, but I'll nerd out anytime you want me to. It's fine.
And listen, I mean, that's why when we can talk about Curtis Hodges as a tight end. Is he going to make the roster? I don't know, but he's a guy that and when I had Donnie Warren on here, he was raving about some of those guys, Hodges, and Rogers at the tight end position beyond the top 3. And like, what do they do? Do they do it this year? Or are they just worth developing and see in maybe 2 or 3 years you have something? And where does Sammis Reyes fit in there? Because, he's got some tough hands at times, but then you see him getting a lot of reps with the ones with Bates out and with Logan Thomas out. You see Reyes getting some work with the ones, but his hands are just tough. He's a good blocker, can help on special teams, but I just don't think you're going to trust those hands.
Yeah, well, tight end clearly is Cole Turner and John Bates are going to make the team, and then a third one is going to make it when Logan Thomas isn't available week 1. Who's it going to be? And then which one goes on the practice squad? And, projecting it out now is impossible. But right now, if I had to guess, it probably would be Reyes because he'll play special teams for them too. And if it's not him, I actually think it's Rodgers over Hodges, but that's where I am right now. Call me in a week and I could, probably would change my mind about it. And then when Logan Thomas comes back, whoever that person is going to go down to the practice squad for sure. I mean, that's what's going to happen.
All right, Bram, well, week 1 in the books. They're back at it Monday. We'll be back out here with daily practice reports, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, see you then.
Thanks, Bram. That's it for this episode. Thanks to Bram for joining me, and thank you, as always, for tuning in. I'll be back on Monday afternoon with another training camp podcast wrap-up. Talk to you next time.